This is NTD Evening News. Live from our global headquarters in New York City, here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. The U.S. now confirms that North Korean soldiers are being trained in Russia. What officials are saying about the operation, and is their goal to fight in the Ukraine war? NTD's international correspondent Ariane Pasdar has the update.
North Korea moved at least 3,000 soldiers into eastern Russia.
White House spokesperson John Kirby on Wednesday confirming that North Korea has sent troops to Russia. South Korea accuses the regime of sending the troops to fight Ukraine. The Pentagon has not confirmed that yet.
If there are co-belligerents, their intention is to participate in this war on Russia's behalf. That is a very, very serious issue.
He added that such involvement would not only affect Europe, but the Indo-Pacific as well. A South Korean lawmaker said this about North Korea's military.
It lacks understanding of modern warfare, such as drone attacks. Therefore, there could be many casualties if they are deployed to the front lines.
The president of Finland previously said that this shows how desperate Russia is at the moment.
Pose the question to anyone in the world, would you like to have North Korean soldiers fighting on your side? And the answer is probably no.
And an update on a $50 billion G7 loan for Ukraine. On Wednesday, President Biden announced the U.S. will contribute $20 billion to that loan. The G7 alliance is using interest earned on Russian assets frozen in the West for the loan.
Now, this is unique. Never before has a multilateral coalition frozen the assets of an aggressor country and then harnessed the value of those assets to fund the defense of the aggrieved party.
The White House wants $10 of the $20 billion to be military aid. The rest will be economic aid. And also in Russia on Wednesday, the summit of the BRICS coalition continues in the country's Kazan region. Extreme security measures have been put in place in the area. That's as leaders from 15 countries such as China, Iran and Venezuela attend the summit. Local residents describe the situation.
The roads are blocked, yes. Cafes are closed. No internet connection, that is the main problem.
President Vladimir Putin is meeting Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro, the president of the Iranian regime, and others. Chinese leader Xi Jinping, India's Modi, and more are attending as well. The heads of state seek to strengthen ties with each other. U.S. officials previously said they don't see the attendees as geopolitical rivals. Ariane Pasdar, NTD News.
5 people were killed and 22 injured in a terrorist attack in Ankara, Turkey. The perpetrators had entered a building of the state-owned aerospace industries. Witnesses reported gunfire and an explosion. NTD's international correspondent David Vives has the details.
A deadly attack struck Turkish aerospace industries near Ankara this afternoon. CCTV footage captures scenes of gunmen attempting to enter the building, as well as inside the building.
We have 4 martyrs and 14 injured. I condemn this heinous terrorist attack and wish God's mercy to our martyrs.
2 terrorists, one of which was a woman and one of which was a man, was neutralized.
3 victims are in critical condition, according to the Interior Minister. The attack, involving an explosion followed by gunfire, took place around 4 p.m. local time. The cause of the attack and the subsequent gunfire remain unclear. No group has claimed responsibility yet. Prosecutors have launched an investigation according to state-run Anadolu agency. Some media reports suggest a suicide attack and possible hostages inside the building, though officials have not confirmed this. Turkish aerospace industries designs and manufactures civilian and military aircraft, as well as defense and space systems. This includes producing F-16 fighter jets under a license from the U.S. David Vives, NTD News.
Israeli forces have begun striking terrorist targets in the ancient city of Tyre in Lebanon. Meanwhile, the Israeli Defense Minister gives a stern warning to Iran about Israel's upcoming attack. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
On Wednesday, Israel ordered residents to evacuate the ancient city of Tyre in Lebanon before Israeli forces began striking Hezbollah terrorist targets a few hours later. A Lebanese resident said he evacuated just like everyone else.
We came back and looked, and our house had collapsed, as you can see. But what we say is that Just like the resistance came, our lives are the most important. We are staying here, and we are steadfast.
And on the same day, Israeli forces released video of strikes on buildings in Beirut that were reportedly weapon storage and manufacturing facilities and command centers of the Hezbollah terrorist group. A resident in Beirut said that while people are saying that Lebanon is united, he says it's not united at all.
One is following the United States, one is following Saudi Arabia, and one is following Iran. In the end, no one is following Lebanon. People must get used to it. There is war, and Israel is treacherous. We are talking about possible escalation. There will be an escalation.
And serious escalation appears to be right around the corner as Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant spoke to troops about their upcoming attack on Iran.
After we attack in Iran, they will understand both in Israel and in other places what your preparation process includes. You have the right to participate in the war on the 7 fronts, and on all these fronts the IDF is present and the Air Force is present. Gaza, Lebanon, Judea and Samaria, Syria, Iraq, Yemen and Iran.
Meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, Israeli forces released a drone video said to show thousands of Palestinians leaving Jabalia as Israel continues to battle the remaining Hamas terrorists in the northern Gaza Strip.
We got out. Martyrs were scattered on the ground, as well as injured people did not know where to go. People are extremely tired. There are entire families and thousands who do not know where to go nor what to do. We are tired.
And Secretary of State Antony Blinken continues his trip in the Middle East, and he met with officials in Saudi Arabia on Wednesday. He spoke with them about the need to end the war in the Gaza Strip, secure the release of hostages held by Hamas, and plans for reconstruction after the war is over. Jason Perry, NTD News.
With Election Day now less than 2 weeks away, former President Trump and Vice President Harris are making their rounds in key battleground states and media appearances. Today, Trump is in Georgia holding 2 campaign events. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley is at the Gas South Arena where Trump is speaking tonight. Jack, what makes Georgia such a critical swing state?
Well, it's one of the biggest swing states with 16 electoral college votes, just a couple behind Pennsylvania there. And remember, back in 2020, Trump lost to Biden here just by 0.2 of a percentage point. 2016, he beat Hillary Clinton by a whopping 5 points here. And right now, the audience is really zeroed in on RFK Jr.'s speech as we speak. He's getting a lot of support here. So we can see a lot of anticipation as President Trump is about to take the stage soon. But earlier today, he was in Zebulon, Georgia, which is about an hour south of Atlanta. And he was talking about how the importance of investing in domestic car manufacturing. Take a look.
One of the things we're doing is interest deductions on when you borrow money to buy a car, you get a deduction on it, and that's great. But you only get the deduction if it's built in America. The car has to be built in America.
Now, Trump also talked about increasing oil production and how that would cancel out a lot of the inflation. And Senator J.D. Vance, his running mate, was over in Las Vegas reflecting that same idea, talking about the impact of high housing costs in Nevada and across the country, and how high housing costs are one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, according to Vance, that parents are not having children. Take a look.
The biggest barrier to people, our young people starting families, having babies, is that they're worried about the cost of housing. So the more that housing gets more expensive, the more that young Americans are going to decide to either wait or to not have a family altogether.
Vance also talked about, and he's reflecting Trump here, when they say that they're going to drill, baby, drill, increasing domestic oil production, and that will help bring back a lot of jobs and then decrease the inflation. And as well as he said that they're going to cut the red tape to ensure more home building. So increasing oil production will make it easier to build homes, and then cutting government regulations as well, he said, as well as turning acres of unused federal land in Nevada into zoned for homes to build homes on. Now, Trump will be speaking here very quickly in about at 7 p.m. Eastern, right here in Duluth, Georgia. Back to you.
Jack, thank you for that update. On the Democratic side, the Harris-Walz campaign has noticeably picked up the pace with rallies and interviews. Many events have been getting a boost from special guests, including former presidents and rock stars. NTD's Jason Blair has the latest from the Harris campaign.
The Harris-Walz team has been working to reel in as many undecided voters as they can in key swing states, as well as get their core supporters energized to show up at the polls. Vice President Harris did 3 talks in 3 separate swing states with Republican former Congresswoman Liz Cheney on Monday, aimed at swing voters. Her running mate Governor Tim Walz appeared with former President Barack Obama in Wisconsin on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, Walz is recording multiple TV interviews for stations in North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. Also on Wednesday, Harris has a live town hall scheduled with CNN in Pennsylvania at 9 p.m. Eastern. Before that, the vice president gave remarks from her Washington residence at the Naval Observatory. She reacted to comments by former Trump White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, saying Trump, quote, falls into the general definition of fascist.
All of this is further evidence for the American people of who Donald Trump really is. This is a window into who Donald Trump really is, from the people who know him best, from the people who worked with him side by side in the Oval Office and in the Situation Room.
Harris's campaign stops have been getting boosted by special guests like the Obamas and musicians. On Thursday, Harris will be joined by former President Barack Obama, as well as Bruce Springsteen in Atlanta, Georgia, another battleground state. It's reported that Springsteen will be headlining the event with a concert. Harris will also be joined by former First Lady Michelle Obama for a rally in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Then, in other campaign-related news, in the swing state of Arizona, police arrested a 60-year-old male suspect in connection to a Harris campaign office being damaged by gunfire. Authorities allege the office was targeted 3 times by the same person. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
During a press conference earlier today, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger says his state can serve as an example to others on how to conduct secure elections.
Georgia is a model when it comes to preventing non-citizen voting. We have front-end citizenship verification, where citizenship is verified through Department of Driver Services or the online voter registration portal. In addition, Georgia is a 100% Real ID compliant state. We conduct continuous list maintenance and require photo ID for all forms of voting. Elections are an ever-changing process, and as more technology becomes available, Georgia election security should grow with it. List maintenance is not a one-time thing.
Georgia officials say there's no proof of non-citizens voting in their state and that it's too high a risk to even attempt. They say if a legal resident is on the path to citizenship and tries to register to vote, they will never become a citizen. Many Americans have already decided whom they want for president. According to data from the election lab at the University of Florida, over 24 million votes have already been cast in this election. They include nearly 10 million in-person votes and over 15 million mail-in ballots. Meanwhile, the presidential candidates are working to appeal to any undecided voters across the 7 battleground states. Polls continue to show there is no clear leader in the race for the White House. And Trump has also been making inroads in the Hispanic vote. Luis Martinez, our Washington correspondent, breaks it down for us.
I just saw a poll that we're actually leading with Hispanics. That's never happened before. I don't know, but it's going to be close.
According to the latest USA Today Suffolk University poll, 45% of Hispanics support Vice President Kamala Harris for the White House and 44% support former President Donald Trump. These figures represent a 20-point drop in support for a Democratic presidential candidate since the 2020 general election and a 12-point increase in support for a Republican presidential candidate.
I think Hispanics very much care about the border. In fact, I saw a recent poll that showed that over 80% of Hispanics are worried about border security, and that impacts their quality of life. As a mayor, and as we've seen, even Democratic mayors have criticized the current administration's border policy.
Hispanic voters represent 15% of eligible voters in the 2024 general election. In every battleground state, the Hispanic vote is actually larger than the difference in between the Republican and Democratic candidates. Another demographic group that has been shifting since the 2020 general election is Black voters.
I'm going to go ahead and just speak some truths, if you don't mind. We have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running.
Since the 2020 general election, Democrats have lost 15 points in their share of support from Black voters, while Republicans have picked up 5 points in their share of Black voters. Republicans have also made gains in the share of early votes and casted either by mail-in ballots or early voting. Almost 36% of those votes are from registered Republicans, a 6-point increase from the 2020 general election. The polls suggest that demographics are not destiny, as Republicans have been able to chip away support from historically left-leaning demographic groups. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Microsoft says Chinese-controlled bots are attempting to influence voters on social media. The tech company published research today that reveals an army of fake accounts. Microsoft said the bots have engaged in a coordinated interference effort in down-ballot races. Research found that the Chinese troll network has gone after Republican Congressman Barry Moore of Alabama, Michael McCall of Texas, and Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. Microsoft said the group responsible is known as Tides Flood. It has previously been associated with the Chinese regime's Ministry of Public Security. The report said the lawmakers are being targeted because of their criticism of the Chinese Communist Party and its policies. Republican Senator Marco Rubio of Florida has been targeted as well, but he isn't up for re-election until 2028. One person is dead and at least 48 others sick after an E. coli outbreak tied to fast food chain McDonald's. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is investigating the multi-state outbreak. As Leah Waldman reports, the CDC believes the outbreak is linked with McDonald's Quarter Pounders.
A health alert coming for the Golden Arches.
Sorry, we don't have the Quarter Pounders at the moment.
The CDC is conducting what they're calling a fast-moving investigation into an E. coli outbreak they say is linked to the popular McDonald's Quarter Pounder and dozens of illnesses reported in at least 10 states, including one death of an older person. Nearly a dozen people have been hospitalized, including a child who developed a serious complication that can develop from an E. coli infection. A map on the CDC website shows most of the illnesses are in Colorado and Nebraska.
We reach out to members of the public that have these positive test results and ask them a series of food survey type questions to try and understand foods that they ate leading up to the onset of their illness.
Information reviewed by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration shows that slivered onions are a likely source of contamination.
I want to talk about onions.
I wanted to take
In a video released on YouTube, McDonald's USA President Joe Erlinger says McDonald's has stopped using the onions as well as quarter-pound beef patties in several states while the investigation continues. In an interview with the Today Show, Erlinger assured customers that other items on the menu are safe to eat.
What we've done at McDonald's is taken this swift and decisive action to address the issue that we have so that the public can be confident in McDonald's.
In New York, Lee Waldman reporting.
Boeing leaking billions in cash as a strike vote draws near. CEO Kelly Ortberg says Boeing is a big ship that will take some time to turn. Here's the story.
Boeing is bleeding billions in cash as 33,000 workers continue striking.
Strike on, boys! Strike on!
The company had an over $6 billion net loss in the third quarter, with a free cash flow of negative $1.95 billion. CEO Kelly Ortberg says Boeing is a big ship that will take some time to turn.
There's no silver bullet. This isn't going to be fixed in one fell swoop. We've got a lot of issues here.
Ortberg brought up Boeing's problems: low trust, too much debt, over $57 billion, and poor performance. At the same time, he said Boeing has a lot of potential. $500 billion in unfulfilled demand, and a customer base that needs its product. Ortberg's first priority, ending the strike. Union members are currently voting on whether to approve a new contract.
Say no to the contract. Say no to the contract.
Some analysts believe workers will reject the latest proposal.
I'm trying to encourage everybody to again vote for a contract that's not a good contract. Like I said, the general wage increase is pittance compared to I feel we should be getting to meet inflation.
The new contract offers a 35% pay raise and a $7,000 ratification bonus. But this is short of the union's demand for a 40% pay increase and reinstatement of defined benefit pension plans.
You know, we're the ones that make it happen, building the airplane, and they're still not recognizing the fact that they wouldn't be where they're at or be receiving what they're receiving if it weren't for us.
Boeing worker Bartley Stokes says he'd be sad if they approved the new contract, which he says is not a good one.
Their primary manufacturing hub is in one of the most expensive areas that's seen the most inflationary pressure in the country. So I think that the workforce has legitimate complaints.
Aerospace expert David Noletti says despite the bad news, CEO Kelly Ortberg is bringing a positive tone to Boeing.
He is clearly identified the major areas that he wants to work on, and he's prioritized them, and he's focusing on solving the machinist strike first, putting some cost control measures in place to try and slow down cash burn, and then focused on ramping production.
Ortberg says he's encouraged by the progress Boeing is making and that they need to continue the momentum.
Starbucks new CEO Brian Niccol has his work cut out for him amid a sharp drop in sales for the third consecutive quarter. Niccol also has to contend with baristas and customers who say they want plenty of changes. Here's the story.
Starbucks has suspended its 2025 forecast as CEO Brian Niccol works to fix the global coffee chain. In preliminary results on Tuesday, it also posted another quarterly slump in sales, with fewer people buying its pricey drinks. Niccol said Starbucks needs to change its strategy to grow again, and that's the goal of his Back to Starbucks plan. He also said the company will make the menu simpler and fix their prices. Tuesday's numbers showed sales, revenue, and profit were down because of low demand in the U.S. Its chief financial officer said that even with increased spending, they couldn't stop a drop in customer visits and are working on a plan to improve, but warned it would take time. Starbucks boosted its quarterly dividend to 61 cents per share to reassure investors about its turnaround plan. As part of that plan, Niccol said they want to change marketing and focus on all customers, not just Starbucks Rewards members. In his first speech as CEO last month, Niccol said he wants to make Starbucks a community coffee house again in the U.S. His clean slate approach is similar to what Nike CEO Elliott Hill plans to do, as Nike had also faced declining sales under its previous leader. Shares have risen 28% since Niccol was named CEO in a surprise move in August. However, it fell around 4 percentage points in after-hours trade. Starbucks plans to release its final quarterly earnings next week.
We are less than 2 weeks from the election, and joining us now to discuss Trump's and Harris's media and ground game operation strategies in the final sprint is Amber Duke. She's the Washington editor at The Spectator and a Steamboat Institute fellow. Amber, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. To begin, nearly 25 million voters have already cast their ballots in this election, according to the University of Florida Election Lab, with many states seeing record early voting turnout. What do you see as behind this push? Have the candidates done anything differently to inspire such a turnout?
Definitely. In 2020, the Democrats had organized pretty aggressively around getting mail-in ballots, early voting, and absentee ballots in as quickly as possible so that they could tally up their votes before Election Day, whereas Republicans were really reliant on their voters doing what they always do, which is actually going out on that first Tuesday in November and casting a ballot in person. And there's been a fundamental shift in the Republican strategy where the Republican National Committee and the Trump campaign in tandem have explicitly made efforts to have voters bank their votes as early as possible. And that way, for both the Democrats and the Republicans, it makes it easier in the final weeks of a campaign because you have fewer voters that you have to target with your money, with your campaign events, and with your micro-targetings, because you pretty much know who in your data file has already voted. And those additional voters that are going out on election day, you can make sure you're speaking solely to them.
And expanding on that, you actually wrote 2 articles titled "Podcasts Dominate the 2024 Election" and "The Turnout Election, A Tale of Two Ground Games." Tell us about that.
Absolutely. So the Kamala Harris campaign has been focused on trying to get after disaffected Democrats, namely the uncommitted voters who would not support Joe Biden during the primary because of his position on the Israel-Gaza war. She's also looking to turn out rural voters who might have traditionally been Republican, but for whatever reason have decided not to support Trump in this election. She's hoping that those 2 coalitions cobbled together will give her enough of an edge to push her into the category of victor. But the Trump campaign is focused on actually expanding his base by adding in low and mid propensity voters, as well as voters who were previously not registered. So since 2020, the Republican National Committee has worked on registering hundreds of thousands of voters in swing states. They've cut the Democratic advantage in states like Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania practically in half. They're hoping that they can simply have a war of attrition as opposed to a war of coalition building, so that they can gather up enough of those disaffected Americans in order to win.
And polls are showing that this election will come down to the independents and undecided voters. How successful do you see these outreaches into, say, podcasts or less traditional avenues in terms of reaching those demographics?
Podcasts are a huge part of reaching independent and disaffected voters, because these are people who have tuned out of a lot of mainstream media sources over the past 4 to 8 years. And they get a lot of their news from either social media or from their favorite podcast hosts. And what they like about these podcast hosts, like Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, like the Andrew Schultz podcast, is that these people are not telling them what to think. They're simply having on guests and allowing the guests to tell them what it is that they believe. And Donald Trump has been doing a heavy media tour across a lot of these podcasts. Some people have derisively referred to it as the bro podcast tour. But this is a legitimate election strategy, as we see that there is a gender gap between the campaigns. Kamala Harris up about 15 to 20 points with women, while Trump leads by about 30 points with men. So although women tend to turn out to vote more than men, the question is Trump able to surmount that lead Harris has with women by really over-indexing on the male vote?
Amber Duke, Washington editor at The Spectator and Steamboat Institute fellow, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Former President Trump's campaign has formally accused Britain's Labour Party of election interference and is seeking an investigation. It follows reports that Labour staff members have traveled to the U.S. to help Democrats in their campaign. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more from London.
Former President Trump's campaign has accused British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's Labour Party of blatant foreign interference in the US election. It comes after some Labour staff members travelled to help campaign for Vice President Harris as volunteers. Trump's team said it filed a formal complaint to the Federal Election Commission, or FEC. The complaint calls for an immediate investigation into what it termed apparent illegal foreign contributions from the Labour Party to the Harris campaign. It cited media reports and a now-deleted LinkedIn post from Labour's head of operations, Sophia Patel, as well as reports of senior Labour officials meeting with the Democratic campaign. Patel wrote that nearly 100 current and former Labour Party staff would be travelling to the US in the coming weeks to help elect Harris in several critical battleground states. It is understood the activists are funding their own travel. Britain's Environment Minister denied any direct Labour Party involvement.
As I say, what people choose to do in their free time and whether she's part of a group linked to the Democrats is entirely up to her, and it's up to individuals if they want to use their holiday to go and campaign for a party, a sister party in another country. People are free to do that. It's not against the law here, it's not against the law in the United States, but it certainly wasn't organised by the Labour Party itself.
A Labour Party spokesperson said it's a common practice for campaigners of all political persuasions from around the world to volunteer in US elections. According to FEC rules, foreigners can volunteer on US election campaigns but cannot make or receive financial contributions. And they cannot be involved in campaign decision-making. If the FEC finds a violation, responses can range from written warnings to fines. The FEC previously fined the campaign of Bernie Sanders after Australia's Labour Party funded the flights and food of its volunteers to travel to the US and support his campaign. Starmer insisted his relationship with Trump is not in jeopardy amid the election interference claims. He reiterated that any Labour members were in the US on an entirely voluntary basis. And he said that he's had dinner with Trump in New York to make sure the two established a good relationship and that he will work with whoever is the next American president. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
For both candidates, there's no better time than now to scoop up the remaining undecided voters. But just how many of them are still out there? NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from the people.
Where are you from?
California.
Texas. Utah.
Northwest Indiana.
We're from Alabama.
Virginia.
Los Angeles.
Palisade, Colorado. I am from Northwest Indiana by Chicago.
Have you guys already made up your mind?
Yes, President Trump.
I have.
I lean towards the left a little bit.
Yes, we have.
Yes.
I decided.
I am decided, and I think that's going to be Trump.
I voted for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
I just want a better economy, and I think Trump's the guy to do it.
So we're voting for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz because we think the most important thing is to kind of keep democracy as the founding point of our country.
If President Trump will incorporate more Christian values into this wonderful, beautiful country that we have.
Do you know anyone who's currently undecided or perhaps not voting at all?
I think all my families have decided to vote for Kamala Harris, so we're all decided.
Most everybody I know is going to vote. It's about 60-40 Republican, Democrat there in the county.
I don't think we know anybody who's undecided. We know a few people probably who aren't going to vote.
And a lot of it comes to a moral standard, too, which they believe there's no candidate that holds to their moral point of view.
No, I think everybody I know is going to vote one way or the other. Very entrenched red or blue, and mainly in Utah, red.
Well, our son was being ignorant the other day speaking about not voting, and we totally course corrected him. We're all Americans. You have the right to vote either way, and you can be wrong, and that's okay.
Yeah, my brother's undecided. He really doesn't like Trump as a person, and he doesn't like Kamala as a person, and so neither one gets his vote. I do know some. I think they don't like the radicalism on both sides.
We do not, honestly. We've done, I think, a pretty good job of making sure everyone is decided and is voting.
Living in a red state and us being as progressive as we are, we see that we all want the same things. It's just finding a means to get there.
I think a lot of people are undecided because I think a lot of people just dislike Trump. I would hope to encourage everyone to vote, regardless of what your views are.
For your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on, but let's start in sports memorabilia news as Shohei Ohtani's 50-50 ball was sold for a record $4.4 million. But have the court sorted out who was the rightful owner in the first place?
No, but they did reach an agreement between the auction house and all the parties involved to let the auction continue, obviously. And now all those proceeds are actually sitting in a bank account right now, waiting for this case to get sorted out. I've never seen anything like this. I mean, there were two guys who brought this ball to the auction house just after Shohei Ohtani's record-breaking home run in Miami last month. But then a few days later, a teenager filed a civil suit against them, saying he originally had possession of the ball and they took it from him, at the game. Then, like a week later, another fan filed suit saying those two took the ball from him as well. So I would love to see video of this mad rush for the ball. I mean, of course, when you're at a game and any ball goes in this end, even a foul ball, it is certainly fans are going to want to go after it. But a ball like this worth millions of dollars where they know it's worth millions, I can't imagine the scrum there. So this case now in the courts, it might not be resolved for a while.
Well, looking at NFL news, the Kansas City Chiefs are finalizing a trade with Tennessee for wide receiver Deandra Hopkins, according to an ESPN report. Now, if this gets completed, what does he bring to this team?
I mean, I think a lot, but they just need healthy receivers at this point. Hopkins, though, he's a 3-time former All-Pro selection. He's been to 5 Pro Bowls. I'll grant he's 32 now, but he had over 1,000 yards receiving last season. That's good for any age. The Chiefs, I mean, they would be amenable to anyone at this point. Their two projected starters, that's Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, both on injured reserve. They also brought in Juju Smith-Schuster. He's out with a hamstring injury, and even though they keep winning, I mean, they're 6-0 amazingly, it's really because of their defense. Patrick Mahomes actually leads the league in interceptions thrown with 8. This is a guy, and he only has 6 touchdown passes through 6 games. So this is a guy who normally gets anywhere from 30 to 50 in a season. He's on pace for 17 right now. Their offense lacks a lot of punch right now, so they just need some healthy receivers to kind of open up the field. Hopkins can at least help them do that.
Shifting gears to basketball, the NBA season tipped off last night with the reigning champion Boston Celtics getting their rings. But meanwhile, history was being made in Los Angeles involving LeBron James.
Yeah, that was pretty special. LeBron James playing with his son, first ever father-son duo in the NBA, period. I mean, whether same team or not. It all happened when Bronny checked in with his dad late in the first half. They played 3 minutes together. Now, Bronny missed both his shot attempts. The crowd would have gone wild if he had made one of them. He did not play in the second half, though. I think it'll be very interesting to see what his role is the rest of the season. You know, he did not have a particularly strong preseason, shot just 25% from the floor, even lower from three-point range. And there was plenty of speculation that the Lakers drafted him more to please LeBron than anything else. I mean, it's fair to say he didn't have a particularly strong season last year at USC. He was 8th on his own team in scoring, and his own team didn't even have a winning record. You know, that said, though, the year before, he was a big-time high school recruit. Sometimes it just takes them a little while to develop, so we'll be definitely following this one for a while, too.
And moving now to international sports, the New York Post reports there was a study presented at the UN earlier this month that showed that female athletes have lost more than 900 medals to transgender competitors. This is across 29 different sports. What were the ultimate recommendations here?
Yeah, keep transgender athletes out of women's sports. It was really pretty simple, you know, protect women's sports. You don't see this problem in men's sports at all. There are reasons, you know, men's and women's sports have been split up. Obvious differences between men and women. More testosterone for men means more muscle, for one thing. Men have larger lung capacity. There's even difference in bone and ligament thickness. I mean, this study also acknowledges that they try to neutralize this by having these, biological men use pharmaceuticals to suppress their testosterone, but it doesn't reverse, what's already happened. Maybe the worst part of this, though, is kind of pretending that all women are fine with them being in their locker room, these transgender athletes. Former NCAA swimmer Riley Gaines, she teared up on Washington, DC at a hearing there when she talked about sharing a locker room with the transgender athletes. So it's really a major issue here.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.